Give me steam. Give me steam. Give me steam. Welcome to Golden VCR. Good morning. Let's do it. Months from Aaron the Baron. Aaron the Baron. 8 months from Ice Famous. Thank y'all. Thank you, everybody, for your lovely support. Good morning and welcome to Golden VCR. Again, it's Monday. I have texted my barber to see if he has an appointment this week. Usually he doesn't, though, within a week, and it's the week before Thanksgiving, so I expect he'll just ghost me. But regardless, good to be here. I figured we could watch a Nat Geo tape to start us off today, because I have a drawer full of them. Cyclone. Brave the eye of the storm in Cyclone. Damn you, Andrew. Anyone at any time can fall victim to nature's raging furies. Around the globe, hurricanes, tornadoes, and typhoons strike without mercy and often without warning. So far this century, more than 500,000 lives have been lost to the violent forces of cyclones, tropical storms, and the wicked weather swirling in and around them. National Geographic chronicles some of the world's most shocking storms with gripping footage and scenes of heart-thumping real-life drama. All right, well, hopefully there haven't been any catastrophic weather events lately that would make this tonally inappropriate. Hopefully catastrophic weather events are not a growing trend in our world. It's Cyclone from National Geographic, and apparently we have a 72nd birthday for TV. So let me get this tape in the VCR. Okay. All right. Let's just go ahead and get that tape. Just get it kind of scooted in there. Let's just do a little, and then we can check out National Geographic Cyclone.
As people get older, they tend to become more concerned about safety. This has certainly been true with me. And since I have already had my 72nd birthday, I am far more concerned about safety than most people.
Happy 72nd birthday to DB505. Hope it's a safe one. This is a later National Geographic video from 1995. We've watched a bunch from the 80s. We'll see how History Channel they got by the mid-90s. Please enjoy.
There's a mind in the forest very much like our own, jockeying for status, developing unique cultures, and sometimes engaging in warfare. Though our ancestors parted ways with the chimp some 6 million years ago, it's been said that chimpanzees and humans share a primate soul. Join us as we come face to face with our nearest relations in National Geographic's The New Chimpanzees.
April 1912. The greatest maritime disaster in North Atlantic history.
I do not have a yo-yo.
RMS Titanic was the ship they called unsinkable.
But I could probably
It
get
was a
one.
luxurious floating palace.
I
the
probably
largest
would get
ship
one.
of her time. Doomed from the moment her maiden voyage began. 74 years later, the Titanic's resting place is uncovered, and explorer Dr. Robert Ballard dives deep into the disaster that shook the world. National Geographic journeys through tragic corridors beneath the sea to uncover the secrets of the Titanic.
This is the bottom of the ocean, an ocean of air as vast and volatile as any sea.
We were just looking at the Titanic, dude. You can't say this is the bottom of the ocean. It's clearly not.
Above the Earth's surface, currents ebb and flow. Some spiral into whirlwinds. The dust devil has more bluster than bite. Other twisters are downright deadly.
Tornado on the ground on 944. Cars split. We got numerous people injured. Stay away from the windows. Tree just blew over. We got a tree over. Look at the top.
Get away from the windows, Jesus.
Tornadoes pack the fastest winds on Earth.
Is this why
But in magnitude,
we were
this spinning giant
constantly
goes
taught about
unmatched.
tornado safety when I was a kid? Did they not do that in the 80s?
Hurricane, typhoon, cyclone, all equally fearsome. By any name, the greatest storms on Earth. Severe tropical storms afflict every continent except Antarctica. In this century, they have claimed over 500,000 lives. Tornadoes have killed over 10,000 in the United States alone. Today, electronic eyes pierce the atmosphere and map its shifting winds. Scientists chart the anatomy of a storm. Their sensors record speed and bearing.
Make it the same level as the tripod.
But none can predict the birth of a killer.
It's gonna get dark soon.
I wish my chair
Nothing
was
in our
violently
power
shaking
can stop
while
the
I watched
fury
this.
of nature's whirling winds.
That would help a lot.
Early spring, 1991. A southern sun heats the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Warm, moist air rises and travels northwest over Texas, Louisiana, and on toward the central United States. More than 1,000 miles away, cool, dry air rushes south from Canada. Rising over the Rockies, dry upper-level air flows east, then spills onto the Great Plains. These forces collide over Tornado Alley on Friday, April 26, 1991. Fast winds high above the ground over slower winds below make the air roll horizontally like a pencil on a tabletop. The atmosphere is unstable. Thunderstorms erupt across the plains. Here and there, an updraft lifts the horizontal spinning of the air into a vertical position. Now the storm rotates as it feeds on warm, moist air near the ground. The day gives rise to supercells, the most complex and dangerous thunderstorms on Earth. Their underbellies bubble with instability. Lightning and hail are the least of their threats. Under the right conditions, they can also spawn monsters. The National Weather Service has tracked the warning signs for a week, predicting severe weather. By April 26th, conditions are textbook perfect for a major outbreak of tornadoes. Throughout the afternoon and evening, across the central states, 56 twisters are reported.
In the Hayesville area to get some more information on that tornado.
Honey, be careful.
It's going to be around 55th South and
Is it going away from us?
Officers are reporting maybe 10 to 15 houses in Hayesville that have been damaged by the tornado.
Is it going away from us?
They're saying that there's going to be damage in the area of 55th and Broadway and also 53rd Street South.
I sure hope you're right.
Then, at 5:57, a killer touches down in Kansas. In Wichita, residents are sitting down to dinner when warnings send them running to basements and storm shelters.
Look at the stuff floating in the air, Ginger. Take cover.
Around 6:20, the tornado takes on a pinkish hue as it pulverizes a nursery full of geraniums. By the time it hits McConnell Air Force Base, the twister is nearly 300 feet wide. The base hospital, school, rec center, and over 100 housing units are leveled. 6:29. In Andover, the town siren fails, but most residents heed warnings by police and news reports. The tornado's funnel has widened to almost 600 feet. At 6:40, it tears through the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park. The twister finally dissipates northeast of Andover. Within minutes, its parent storm drops another funnel along the Kansas Turnpike.
Can you get in the left lane, Greg?
Yeah.
Oh, that didn't help us. Go back. You're okay, you're okay. Keep going, man, keep going. faster? No. Yeah. Lots faster.
A local TV crew tries to outrun it.
Lots faster, Greg. It's catching us. You gotta go, buddy.
Even at 85 miles an hour, they can't get out of its way.
Get up under here.
They stop at an overpass where a father and his 2 daughters run for cover.
Hang on to the girder. Don't worry about it. Hang on.
As the twister spins out its final moments, a dread calm takes its place.
You need some place to sit down.
Along the turnpike, people are pulled from trucks and cars tossed like children's toys. Andover is hardest hit. In what was the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park, 10 bodies are found. Kansas bears a bitter toll. Over 1,700 homes destroyed or damaged, and 20 dead. Survivors will never forget.
The car was hovering. It was about 3 foot off the ground, just sort of floating in the air. Then all of a sudden, the car left and went right out the roof.
What looked like typing paper floating around was really not. It was like
garage doors
and window frames, parts of houses.
Ambushed on a country road, Brooke Ibarra took shelter under the nearest tree. In a flash, she was airborne, then dropped 1,000 feet away.
The cows all of a sudden started running like a stampede. I was picked up by the tornado, and there was all sorts of debris. One thing I remember was the cow that flew past me. He was screaming. And then before I knew it, it was over, and I was just laying in the field next to a tractor engine.
Wounds are healed, neighborhoods rise from the rubble. The human spirit endures. Such is life in Tornado Alley, USA. Midwesterners once called them cyclones. Early photographs and motion pictures held viewers spellbound. Tornadoes begat their own myths. Some claimed they fused coins in people's pockets and cooked potatoes in the ground. In truth, they make airborne missiles of everyday objects. Some have deposited heirlooms 40 miles from home. Do they pluck feathers from chickens? No. Blame that on sheer fright. They inspire no less terror in people. April 3rd and 4th, 1974. In the largest outbreak on record, 148 tornadoes race across 13 states. March 18th, 1925, the deadliest tornado in history leaves the longest path. 219 miles of continuous devastation, 689 dead. Until the 1950s, accurate tornado wind speeds remain a mystery. Then a frame-by-frame analysis of this footage clocks flying debris at 170 miles an hour. Tornado science takes a leap forward in 1953 when Dr. Ted Fujita leaves Japan for the American Midwest.
The main reason why we are here is to find out what tornado did. And in case of future tornadoes, what people should do, that's the kind of thing we want to find out.
4 decades of research will earn him the title Mr. Tornado.
That, I think, it's a grain elevator up here.
At disaster sites, Fujita proves there's much to be learned without braving a twister directly. He likens tornadoes to criminals who leave their fingerprints behind. Ground markings are clues to a twister's inner structure and dynamics. To test his theories, he builds a tornado machine at the University of Chicago. He discovers that most strong tornadoes are actually several small twisters rotating around the center of a larger one. These mini tornadoes can lay waste to one house, yet leave its neighbor unscathed. Fujita's ideas have been amply confirmed in nature and remain a cornerstone of tornado science. Although they occur around the world, 3 out of 4 tornadoes streak the skies over the United States. They favor the springtime and the warm hours between noon and sunset. We say a tornado touches down. It actually sucks in air from near the ground and carries it upward in a spiral. Most range from 150 to 1,200 feet in width and travel over land at about 30 miles an hour. The funnel is often hollow, a tube of condensed water vapor that takes on the color of dust and debris. In North America, most tornadoes rotate counterclockwise. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 spins in the opposite direction. Twisters appear in many guises. They can bring to mind the snapping of a bullwhip or the delicate dance of ghosts. A single storm can spawn several distinct funnels, a grouping referred to as a family. For all their fury, most tornadoes are short-lived. Many last only minutes. To the scientists who would study them, they are elusive prey. How to penetrate the twister's secrets? Aiming weather balloons and instrumented rockets into tornadoes have yielded limited results.
See whether we can. All right. 3, 2, 1. Fire. There. Nope.
In the 1980s, researchers at the National Severe Storms Lab tested the Totable Tornado Observatory, nicknamed Toto, after Dorothy's dog in The Wizard of Oz. This 400-pound package of sensors was to record what no human can even approach without risking life and limb. But predicting the path of a tornado proved to be nearly impossible. Toto had one close call, no direct hits. For now, the safest way to see inside tornadoes is to probe them from afar with Doppler radar. Like an X-ray of a storm, the system displays wind speed and direction. In 1981, scientists first detected the spiraling signature of a tornado on Doppler radar. Today, the system is used to issue warnings to the public. Still, we're not exactly sure why twisters form at all.
We probably could produce a higher base storm.
For Howard Bluestein, professor of meteorology at the University of Oklahoma, there's only one way to find out.
Again, Satellite pictures are nice, radar pictures are nice, but you need to look out the window and see the clouds in their very, very fine scale to get a feeling for what's happening. I don't understand how one can study a phenomenon without actually experiencing it, seeing it or feeling it or tasting it. To me, that sets everything in motion. That makes me want to understand why it's there, what causes it, what's going to happen to it.
They just issued a tornado warning for right where we are.
Should we set up?
Every spring, Bluestein exercises two considerable talents: chasing tornadoes and measuring them with the latest technology. Portable Doppler radar is like a meteorological magnifying glass. It allows Bluestein to measure wind speed in very fine detail in specific regions of a tornado.
Okay, we've got to get going quickly. That thing is starting to form a nice funnel. Actually, hold it. Can you turn it on?
Oops, up power.
It's starting to form a funnel. It's not that far away.
I'm on the left side of that tight circulation.
Bluestein's success rate is better than most storm chasers.
The funnel cloud is just to our north-northwest. We're packing up the radar.
He estimates 1 in 9 expeditions ends with an encounter.
Okay, you got it? Yeah. Oh, somebody's taking pictures. Recorder starting. Which mode are you in? I'm in CW. Okay, tornado is crossing the path of the radar.
Debris in the air.
Strong tornadoes almost always form under the southwest edge of a storm. Bluestein plots his course accordingly and tries to place his team roughly 2 miles from touchdown.
Zoomed out.
Just center the whole
I'm
thing.
zoomed in all the way down.
Center it.
Oh, what a classic. Should I go to FM?
Only if you have a good CW signal.
Monitor. Okay, yeah. That's good.
We're detectives, and we're looking for lots of bits of evidence. And the more pieces of evidence we have, the more likely it will be that we'll be able to solve the puzzle of why tornadoes form and what's their structure.
April 26, 1991. Bluestein and his team track the outbreak that will ravage Andover, Kansas.
Stopping, tornado.
Let's go.
A spectacular funnel stops them in Red Rock, Oklahoma. Their Doppler radar will capture the fastest wind speed on record, nearly 280 miles an hour. In the heat of the chase, even Bluestein can miss a beat.
Get out of here fast. Let's go.
For less frenzied fieldwork, Bluestein turns to these hunting grounds, the Florida Keys. August 1993. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Geographic Society reunite Bluestein with Dr. Joseph Golden, Expedition Chief Scientist. As a graduate student, Bluestein once joined Golden to explore the skies over Key West. This expedition marshals state-of-the-art scientific and photographic technology. The quarry, a phantom twister that haunts these tranquil waters. In 1967, on a vacation trip, Golden took a sightseeing flight over the Florida Keys and had a chance encounter with one of our atmosphere's most startling apparitions. Since that time, he has become the world's leading expert on waterspouts. Our knowledge of these ethereal ribbons was once based largely on mariners' accounts. Golden first emphasized their similarities to tornadoes.
We're making a short left-hand turn here of about 40 degrees just for a minute, then we'll be coming back to about 075.
Though usually smaller than a twister over land, they form in gentler weather than most violent tornadoes, allowing close inspection. Smoke flares will help visualize airflow near the sea surface. For Bluestein, this is an unparalleled ringside seat.
When we're out in the Great Plains looking at tornadoes, we cannot see what's happening right at the ground very clearly, nor can we see what's happening at cloud base extremely clearly. The perspective that we get from the helicopter, in that we can look down at the sea surface and see the effects of rotation at the ground level, and also be at cloud base and practically kiss the condensation funnel. It's right outside the window. Is really spectacular.
Ultimately, the ghostly waterspout may reveal the hidden forces that trigger tornadoes.
Joe, August climatology works. That was incredible.
Other whirling winds demand a more lofty vantage point.
Okay, Declan, as we approach the hurricane from the southwest, you can see we're flying with the
Book a seat on the space shuttle for the perfect view of these monsters, over 500 miles wide and some 10 miles high. Creatures of the sea, they breed in the warm oceans of the tropics. Depending on their birthplace, we call them cyclones, typhoons, or hurricanes. These giants can stir up more than 1 million cubic miles of the Earth's atmosphere every second and travel across an ocean at up to 30 miles an hour. Yet they have humble beginnings. In the summer and fall, the sun heats vast stretches of tropical ocean to over 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm, moist air rises over these hot spots, forming bands of thunderstorms. Upper-level winds push storm systems westward as surface winds spiral into the low pressure beneath the clouds. Occasionally, one such spinning wheel of thunderstorms gathers strength, feeding on moisture and heat. When winds reach 74 miles an hour, a hurricane is born. The storm's architecture is highly organized. Rain bands up to 300 miles long converge in the most violent sector, the eye wall. Here, winds of up to 200 miles an hour spiral upward. Within the eye, downdrafts of dry air create an eerie calm. Most severe tropical storms spin out their lives uneventfully in the open sea. When one threatens to come ashore, the world's eyes are trained upon it, including those of Jim Leonard. A professional storm chaser, Jim checks forecasts religiously. He prowls the globe for weather that most people would simply flee. Among chasers, Jim has few peers. Some say he has videotaped more severe storms than anyone on Earth. He has no formal training, no college degree in meteorology, just a lifelong passion.
15F, you're all set.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When I was 10 years old, I had my first real hurricane experience with Hurricane Donna. We got probably winds of 80, 90 miles an hour. It was quite an exhilarating experience at that point. People think I'm crazy, but that's their own opinion. It's not going to change. I've always been crazy about storms, and I always will be. The best of them all probably was Hurricane Hugo. went down to Puerto Rico and got a direct hit. And as it got stronger and stronger, debris was starting to be lifted off the parking lot, and it looked like it was going to get blown back toward us. So we decided at that point to start going down the stairway. As we're going down the stairwell, the rain is being driven into the walls, through the stairs, coming down the stairway, and the wind you hear squealing. At this point, it's probably in excess of 150 miles an hour. And that was quite an experience. It was like one of the chasers called it the hallway from hell. I have no reason to be in a storm if it's going to scare me. I'll, get to the point, play the safe route as far as I can. But if I want to get that ultimate shot, of course you're going to take some chances.
1992, Typhoon Omar in Guam.
Is this a piece of wind or is it a piece of wind?
Yeah, really. I wouldn't miss a great eye wall like this for anything.
Jim and a fellow tracker have a close call as Omar's eye wall comes ashore. Now the storm's placid eye engulfs them.
It seems over. It really does, but it's not. We're going to get
eerie.
blitzed again.
I know.
I can't believe that we're going to get blitzed again. It just seems impossible. That was flabbergasting.
The unsettling lull does not last. Here, the trailing edge of the eye wall rushes in, with winds blowing in the opposite direction.
I didn't know. Wait, it looked like it was going to wait a few minutes.
Yeah, I know.
It wasn't coming on.
Yeah, if I knew it was this, I would have hurried more.
In 1991, Jim achieves a personal best.
Typhoon Uri, when it approached the southern part of Guam, I did a little bit of carelessness there, but I got the storm surge shots that I always wanted to get. But the water came up a little faster than I thought it would.
Winds and low pressure allow the sea surface to rise near the storm's eye. When it hits land, this mound of water rushes ashore.
That's what you call storm surge. We're in. Oh, great.
When the surge is waist deep, Jim retreats. He, more than most, knows that a hurricane's most deadly weapon is not wind, but water. Nine out of 10 hurricane victims are drowned by storm surges. They can raise tides more than 20 feet above normal and flood 100 miles of coastline under 10 feet of water. "15% of the world's population live at risk from severe tropical storms. Atlantic hurricanes assault the U.S., Mexico, and the Caribbean. Typhoons born over the western Pacific Ocean batter Japan, China, and the Philippines. Most deadly are the cyclones that strike Bangladesh. Here, millions farm a river delta in places only inches above sea level. Escape routes are few. Loss of life has been appalling. In a single 1970 storm, over 300,000 dead. Of all the atmosphere's threats, these giants should hardly catch us off guard. Weather satellites track them from birth. But no technology can predict exactly where one will go. To penetrate the hurricane's secrets, researchers ride a flying laboratory into the eye of the storm.
David? Yes, sir. We're going to go in at 10,000 feet. At 10, no? perimeter of the plane is safe.
Looks impressive anyway. We have about 15 miles to the beginning of the wall here.
External sensors measure temperature, air pressure, humidity, and wind speed as the plane braves the turbulence of the eye wall.
I got 100 knots of wind now.
Yeah, I thought it might drop off when it has.
Not yet?
Up ahead, it looks like it probably won't. We may see some 200 knot gusts there, 25 knot updraft.
Okay, we're just coming into the edge now.
An oasis of calm, over 9 miles tall. The eye is virtually clear from sea to sky.
You guys see a center down below there?
I think we're just about directly over it. Looks good. I think we got the center here.
Okay, I'll mark it.
The eye's exact location and vital statistics are sent to forecasters on shore. Data also flows to this meteorological think tank, the Hurricane Research Division in Miami, Florida. What global ingredients determine how many hurricanes are born each year and what paths they follow? Stanley Goldenberg, research meteorologist, says clues range from the El Niño phenomenon to rainfall in Africa.
No, it's a little bit different scale, but it's still...
He crafts computer models based on the premise that an organized piece of weather like a hurricane can be defined in mathematical terms.
The atmosphere is an orderly universe. There's physical rules, physical laws that govern these things. It's just a matter of having the right data, looking at it with the right tools and the right analyses. I mean, the real art is pulling the information out of the data.
Goldenberg helped refine one of the models the National Hurricane Center uses to issue forecasts. But he had never experienced a hurricane on the ground until 1992. On August 17th, Tropical Storm Andrew takes shape, about halfway between Africa and the Caribbean. During the following days, the storm slowly intensifies. Then high-level winds begin to tear Andrew apart, slowing its momentum.
Well, it's the slowest one. Yeah. But so say 3 days puts it here. Yeah. So by 4 days. 4 days. Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
To Goldenberg and most other meteorologists, Andrew has only the slimmest chance of ever becoming a hurricane.
So we'll see.
Winds are now near 100.
Friday, August 21st. As high-level winds die down, Andrew begins to reorganize and quickly gathers strength. Computer models show Andrew might head toward southern Florida, but Goldenberg and his colleagues dismiss any immediate threat. Stan leaves work early to prepare for an important weekend. His wife, Barbara, is due to deliver their 4th child on Sunday. 750 miles from Miami, Andrew's winds exceed 74 miles an hour on Saturday, August 22nd.
Hurricane warnings in effect for Dade and Brown counties, and a hurricane watch is in effect for Collier County.
The first hurricane of the Atlantic season is born. By noon on Sunday, massive evacuations are ordered along the Florida coast. Sunday afternoon, right on schedule, Barbara has been in labor since around 6 a.m.
Well, here we have from the hurricane to the other action in this room, which is Barbara going through early stages of labor, over 4 centimeters contracted, going through labor pains.
In the birthing suite, Stan videotapes the proceedings with all the fervor of an expectant father.
Our nurse here.
Still, the meteorologist in him can't help but be distracted.
And we still have, waiting for the hurricane, beautiful skies, calm. You never know what was going to happen here in the next 12 to 14 hours or so.
Late in the day, Andrew's winds accelerate to 150 miles an hour. Traveling nearly due west, it descends upon the Bahamas. Around 6 p.m., it strikes Eleuthera Island, packing a storm surge 23 feet high, taking 4 lives.
Having a boy makes you feel like a father, and having a girl makes you feel like a daddy, right?
There you go.
Stan steals a few hours with the new arrival, Pearl, then leaves the hospital. He'll ride out the storm at home.
Hurricane to hit Miami.
In Miami, violent skies herald Andrew's approach. Inland, residents take routine safety measures. Seven miles from shore, Stan and his boys are joined by his sister-in-law and family.
Sunday, 23rd of August. We have the family here, Jonathan and Daniel, Roger, Benjamin, Joseph, Aaron, Reuben. We have Ann, and we're going to weather it out through the storm. Hi, Daniel, say hi.
In the dead of night, Andrew suddenly intensifies as it approaches the tip of Florida. August 24th, around 4:30 a.m., Andrew comes ashore.
Looks like our TVs are out. Maybe the power is out now for the duration of this. You can hear that outside. You can start to hear the roar outside.
In the hallway of the Goldenberg house, winds outside, I think, are at least 100, 110 miles an hour or more. Aaron, are you okay? And there's the cat. And here's everybody here, just waiting out in the hall because we lost the plywood on the front window. But we are praying God will cover that. And we're just sitting back here resting in the Lord. In the hallway, we can feel our ears constantly pop from the pressure drops. Yes, Jonathan? Lord, we just thank you. We ask your protection. This is Stan at 8:30 in the morning. We have been through a night. This is our street. Trees down everywhere. The big tree, this was a huge tree in front of me, just one window broken on that car. Trees down everywhere. These are our sweet, precious neighbors. These shutters survived the storm. Every window covered with this type of shutter survived. But our house, which had wood shutters, the roof lifted off. And as you can see, we have no house. This wall fell on us, containing the refrigerator, the stove. This is the wall. Fell on top of us. Stove down there, cabinets, all fell on top of us. And that small space you're looking at, the mattress and everything, that's where we were pinned and protected during the worst part of the storm. Benjamin and Joseph.
Incredibly, 3 adults, 6 children, and a kitten emerge unharmed from the wreckage that was Stan's home. The scope of the disaster has not yet dawned on Miami. At the hospital, Barbara rests assured that her family is safe.
Can perhaps get the first look at what's going on up in the air from Sky 4.
The hospital had an emergency generator, so we still had power. And we saw all of the first footage of this destruction and storm, and we were in shock. The first areas they went through, they were kind of relieved, saying, oh, and just making interesting comments about how this car is thrown here and there. But they became much more sober as they went farther south.
This is incredible. It has just flattened this area.
It did not look possible that anybody could be alive. And that was just a mile or two from my house. And at that point, I really felt despair.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there must have been about, let's say, counting and trying to estimate at least 300 to 400 mobile homes here. The rest are just completely gone.
In the morning, my wife finally got through to somebody there just to find out I was okay. Somehow we both had a peace that each of us was okay. But I still remember the first time I got through to her on the phone. You know, I just wept. I mean, it wasn't just the excitement of getting through to her, it was me pouring out the emotions of what I had been through. I mean, we'd been through an incredible experience.
Andrew's storm surge wreaked havoc along the Florida coast, but its winds devastated an area larger than the city of Chicago. Some 135,000 dwellings damaged or destroyed. The homeless numbered 160,000. It seemed miraculous only 44 died. Not one official wind gauge survived Andrew's peak winds. No one knew how fast they had gusted. Intrigued, Dr. Ted Fujita, Mr. Tornado, flew to Miami to study the aftermath. Roofs ripped from homes. Trees snapped in half. Concrete beams carried hundreds of feet. Plywood embedded in a tree trunk. Fujita finds evidence of winds up to 200 miles an hour. But his most startling findings come from aerial surveys with local meteorologists. They point out narrow streaks of total devastation near areas with lesser damage. To Fujita, the patterns are eerily familiar.
Straight out that way. See the street? There, right across the lake. And those are the elements.
He develops a theory that the worst damage in Andrew was caused by mini-swirls, tornado-like rotations, brief but violent, embedded in the eye wall. The theory has personal meaning for Stan Goldenberg.
We never expected the kind of damage that we experienced. We had, not only were we in the area of some of the maximum winds of the storm, we had in addition, we believe, an area of more intense winds, probably caused by the mini swirls that Ted Fujita talks about. There was a strip right through my house of homes that were devastated, and I was right in that strip.
Stan would relocate his family to a new house. Parts of Florida remain scarred to this day. Andrew also ravaged the Louisiana coast, taking 17 lives. Finally, the storm would vanish over the mid-Atlantic states some 2 weeks after its birth. Andrew was America's costliest disaster, but it had a silver lining. It spared New Orleans, a city defined by water. Repeatedly
thank
flooded
God New
and
Orleans
drained
is
over
okay.
the past 3 centuries, the metropolis was built on swampland surrounded by the Mississippi River.
Those levees are holding strong in 1995. Good thing there's no systematic neglect.
Shaped like a bowl, the city's terrain rises near its edges and dips in its midsection to below sea level.
Good thing we're dedicated to maintaining those levees.
Lake Pontchartrain crowns its northern shore. Over 100 miles of levees and flood walls up to 20 feet above sea level keep river and lake at bay. Massive floodgates fill the gaps. New Orleans has one of the best drainage systems in the world, powered by 21 colossal pumps. The city has known hurricanes in this century, but not a direct hit from a storm like Andrew, and not with up to 1 million people to evacuate over narrow bridges and causeways.
Fuck. Yeah, this was exactly 10 years before Katrina. Did they really have to end this tape with, hooray, nothing bad will ever happen to New Orleans?
Former meteorologist in charge of the New Orleans National Weather Service office, Bill Crouch, fears the levee system provides a false sense of security.
It's a two-edged sword because it protects the people's homes most of the time, but if water ever comes over the levees, it's going to get as deep as the levees are tall, and the lake would be 19 or 20 feet deep. This means that in parts of New Orleans that are below sea level, the water could be 30 feet deep. That is, you would not be safe even in a 3-story house. So those are the scenarios we look at, which would force people to go upward into the buildings downtown. And even using that refuge, it's my belief there would still be a great loss of life.
One day, 5, perhaps 50 years from now, a hurricane like Andrew might descend on New Orleans.
10. It was 10.
The city might be jammed with tens of thousands of tourists, oblivious to the dangers of hurricanes. Evacuation would be ordered, and many would heed the call. But adverse weather could move in quickly and flood the causeway, knocking out bridges. A hurricane approaching from the southeast could fill Lake Pontchartrain with its storm surge. Water would rush over hurricane protection levees. Pumping stations would be overwhelmed. This grim scenario may be imaginary, but the threat is not. 100,000 might be stranded in the heart of the city. The city of New Orleans has enlisted federal, state, and local emergency management agencies to prepare for just such a nightmare. There are many other potential disasters along the U.S. coastline. It is only a matter of time before another great storm exacts its toll. Nature has given us fair warning. A gossamer veil of atmosphere is all that protects us from the sterile reaches of space. What we call weather is simply the Earth's attempt to balance heat and moisture around the globe. Swirling winds may spawn tornadoes and hurricanes, but they can also breed whimsy.
Hooray, whimsy.
On a summer afternoon.
Not time for some goddamn whimsy.
Our home is a planet perpetually in the making, forever new. The same awesome powers that sustain life can also wreak destruction. It is up to us to be prepared.
Those playful children.
There lies the challenge and the delight of living on this dynamic Earth.
Enjoyed their time with the Dust Devil, then grew up to work in the World Trade Center. That was a National Geographic tape, man. It got very real at the end. Some really amazing. It's very Twilight Zone. The sense of dread. It turns out. God. It was really hard. It's hard to separate the signal from the noise sometimes. Like, you know, around this time in the media landscape, there was this same kind of tone and this same kind of shit on like the History Channel, where it's like aliens might invade, and you didn't realize it at the time, But when the National Geographic was talking about Louisiana, New Orleans might be destroyed by a hurricane overtopping the levees, that wasn't bullshit. That we should have listened. I accept personal responsibility. I should have prevented Hurricane Katrina. And I'm sorry that I didn't.
We hope you have enjoyed this presentation from the National Geographic Video Library.
It's always dysfunctional systems. Speaking of white, it's white sewing machines. Let's check it out. This looks like a long tape, actually. This is the white 1866 video workbook, made in China. Let's see what we got here. We also had, let's see. Oh, a 12 months from Sentai Brad. Amazing. Thank you for that resub, dude. And 11 months. No, 12 months from Missing though. Oh my god. Oh my god. It has been a year. It has been quite a year. Quite a year of tapes. Sewing machines. This is from Trill. I don't know if this is Trill's personal sewing machine tape or if it was found at a thrift store or what, but what? Producer Nancy Jewell. January 22nd. Oh, that's my mom's birthday, 2002. I hope I don't have that set as a security question. I don't think I do. Why are all these tapes so loud today?
Hello, and welcome to the wonderful world of sewing on your new white sewing machine.
Hot.
I'm Sue Hausman, host of the America Sews Public Television Sewing Series, and White Sewing Machines has asked me to teach you how to use your new white 1866. I would suggest you take it out of the box and set it on a firm surface. Your kitchen table would be great, and it has a wonderful carrying handle that folds away when you're not using it for carrying. You'll want to wipe off the surfaces in case they have any lint or oil on them from shipping, and then you'll be ready to take the foot control and cord assembly and plug in your new white sewing machine. As you go to the right side, you'll see that the foot control plug is notched and ready to go into place. You plug the other end into the wall, and you're ready to sew. As soon as you turn on your white sewing machine with the little button at the bottom, turn it on, and that turns on power and the light to illuminate your sewing work. Now, just quickly, to make your sewing machine sew, you will step on a foot control. I have it up here so you can see it. The harder you push on the foot control, the faster your white sewing machine will sew. We're going to put it on the floor, and you'll be running it with your foot control. And first, we want to talk a little bit about some of the other extras. In the side of the styrofoam in the box, there is a wonderful extension. I call this the flatbed extension and storage. It simply slides in place to the left, and now you have a much larger sewing surface when you're doing a big project. Slide it off. First you slide it on to the right, slide it off to the left, and you'll notice that concealed inside is a storage tray for all of your accessories. You simply grip it and slide it out. It's actually a pivot tray. You can take it off to put it back in. You simply put that little pin in the corner and slide it back in. I actually like to leave mine setting by my machine because I find it easy to use. You can sew with or without the extension tray. Without it, you have the free arm, and we'll be talking more about that later.
This is a long instructional tape. I don't know if the
teach how to wind a bobbin.
I don't know if the hot mic
there is a
will
bobbin in
be
your
a
accessories,
deal breaker here.
and you have a
It
little
may be
felt
for me.
pad that can be placed
It's decidedly
under the
less
spool.
chill
So we'll pull up the spool pin, and we'll place
when the audio
little
is
felt
assaulting
pad
your ears.
underneath the thread. And any type of quality sewing thread will work just fine on your white sewing machine. I'm going to place my spool on the spool pin, and I'll be prepared to place the bobbin on the bobbin winder spindle. But what I'd like to first show you is that you saw a minute ago, when I step on the foot control now, my needle goes up and down. There's another way to make the needle go
that's
up
sweet
and
of you,
down,
Trill.
and that's by turning the hand wheel.
I've never heard of white sewing
I
machines.
want to keep the needle from going up and down while I'm winding a bobbin. So what I'm going to do is grip the hand wheel with my left hand and turn the inner part of that wheel toward me to loosen it. Now when I step on the foot control,
the photo studio
the needle
backdrop behind
doesn't
her.
go up and down. I'm in a bobbin winding position. I'll move that bobbin winder spindle over for you because right now nothing's happening there either. But when I move it to the right, you'll notice it turns. And of course, with a bobbin on it, when it's turning, that means we'll be winding a bobbin. So take the bobbin from your accessories and simply put it in place and turn it until it snaps down in place. It's real easy. Bring the thread from the spool around the bobbin tension disc, and that's this little disc right here. It's only used for winding a bobbin. We bring it in front of that disc, around that disc, not under that guide, just around the disc itself, and then back over to the bobbin. Put 5 or 6 turns on the bobbin in a counterclockwise direction, and then push the bobbin to the right to make it turn, and go ahead and go. And look what happens. You're actually winding a bobbin. It will stop automatically when it's fully wound.
Why is bobbin?
But you don't always need a full bobbin. Keep that in mind. If you're doing a quick sewing project, you might only need a few yards just to do a little
You have
mending.
the spool of thread,
And of
but then you
course,
put it on the tiny
additional
little
bobbins are
bobbin. Is that so you
available
can
at
have
your
it like
favorite
closer to
fabric
the
or sewing
thing?
machine store. Okay,
For,
we'll
like,
pop that
tensioning
bobbin
reasons?
winder spindle back. We'll tighten this hand wheel now so that our needle will go up and down and we can sew. And then simply lift the bobbin off, cut the thread, and we're now ready to put the bobbin into your new white sewing machine. And that's real easy to do too, because you simply open the bobbin door cover, and once you've done that, you see the bobbin case, and the bobbin's inside that case. Take a hold of this little hinged finger and pull out the bobbin case. Now when you're holding that little finger out, the bobbin is actually held in the case. When you let go of that little finger,
an
the bobbin
incredible
falls
amount
out.
of
We're
tangential
prepared now to
knowledge of
insert
sewing machines
the
and
bobbin
sewing.
into the bobbin case. We'll take the bobbin we just wound.
For someone who has
we'll
never
place it
sewed,
so that the thread is
I know a lot
coming
about sewing.
over the top of the bobbin, and we'll drop the bobbin into that case. And then I want you to take note of the little slot right on the side of the bobbin case. Because the thread needs to go
I did when I
into
was
that
like,
little
you know,
slot,
7
just
years
like
old.
that.
I would
It's
help
very
my mom
easy. And then
when she was
up
hemming
into what
pants
we
and
call
stuff.
the
She would have me
bobbin
with the seam ripper
tension
ripping the hems out.
and you can actually hear it click in there. Now you can see that as you pull the thread, the bobbin will turn clockwise. Now remember, when we're not holding that little hinge, that bobbin will fall out. So before we go to put that bobbin case into the machine, we're going to grab that little hinge again so that it holds the bobbin in place. Then we're going to position the bobbin with this finger up, and we're going to push it onto the bobbin little spindle that's in there, push it in place, but you can't have it flopping around like that. You have to push it in tightly till it clicks in place, and it won't click in place unless you have that finger up correctly. Okay, once the bobbin's threaded, close that bobbin door. And now we're ready to thread the top part of the machine. And this is just as easy. First, we'll take the thread out of that bobbin tension disc because we only use that for winding the bobbin. But the first 2 thread guides are actually a part of this total guide. So bring the thread from the spool pin behind that guide, pull it forward, up, and then back. That will slot it right into this guide on the left side very easily. Now bring the thread over the guide on the left, which is this one right here. Bring it from the back over that guide. Hold on to the thread with your right hand and lay it into the tension discs. These are actually the discs that will close when you put the presser foot down and will put tension on the thread. So lay it on either side of that tension disc and then down under the check spring. Now I'm going to open the faceplate door so that you can see a little bit better. Right here under that check spring. And now I think you can see that as I came under there, that guide has a little spring in it that needs to go up and down and control the tension of the thread. The next step is the take-up lever. And you want to bring the thread in front of that little knob on it and then pull it forward, and it slots right into it so easily. I do want to point out that it's possible to do that wrong if you aren't paying attention, because it happened to me yesterday. I went too low, and you see how it looks, I think I have it threaded, but it isn't. So we want to be sure when we come up to the take-up lever to simply lay it in front of the little knob and bring it forward. And by the way, you're coming from the right and over to the left. And then down just above the door, you'll see one more guide, and then a final guide right there above the needle. Both of those are threaded from left to right. Now it's time to thread the needle. We simply cut the thread blunt with our scissors and thread the needle from front to back. And that's easy to do. Once you've threaded it, grab a hold of that end and pull the end of the thread through, and you are ready to go. Now there we have a little wrap around the needle. You don't want that. Of course, when we lower the presser foot, we have tension on the thread. The next step would be to bring up the bobbin thread. Now hold the top thread firmly with your left hand, and if you'll remember, when we pressed on the foot control, the needle went up and down. Well, there's another way to have the needle go up and down, and that is to turn the hand wheel with your hand, always turning it toward you. So I'll turn the hand wheel one full turn.
The White Sewing Machine Company was founded in 1858 in Templeton, Massachusetts.
And very importantly, this take-up lever will go down and come back up. So as I turn, the take-up lever and the needle go down into the bobbin area, they come back up, and I'm going to turn until that take-up lever is back at the top position, and you'll notice that what happened, a little loop from the bobbin came up. That loop of thread is bobbin thread, and now I pull them out, and I'm ready to sew. Take that thread and place it under the presser foot and toward the back before you begin to sew. We're just about ready to sew, but I don't want to forget to teach you about the presser foot pressure adjustment. Now that's here behind the faceplate.
It looks like a foot, and it steps.
Presser foot pressure is how much push the foot puts on the fabric when you lower the presser foot. So when I put the presser foot down on the fabric, then I have quite a bit of push. But if I move this pressure to zero, I have very little push. Now, this would not be good for normal sewing because your fabric wouldn't feed very well. It's the pressure and the feed teeth that make the fabric feed. For very lightweight fabrics, you may want to use the setting of 1. But for normal sewing, just set this lever to 2. And for very heavy things, you could go all the way down to 3. I'm going to leave it on 2 for what we're doing today, and I would suggest that that's where you leave it at home too. We'll close the faceplate, and now let's talk about the dials. What I love about this model is that the stitches are all pictured on the front, and then of course with those stitches you can do many, many stitch functions. And the stitches are also pictured on the stitch selection dial. So what's great is you simply dial the dial to the picture of the stitch you wish to sew. It's that easy. I'm going to go back to the straight stitch. Then your stitch length determines how many stitches per inch or how close together the stitches are. And we'll just change that and teach you for each stitch as we do it. And the reverse button right here. It's that simple to sew on your new white. So let's set a straight stitch. We'll set our length to about 2.5 to 3, and we'll place our fabric under the presser foot and lower the presser foot before you start to sew. Now I step on the foot control. You'll remember the harder I step on the foot control, the faster I sew. I do have seam guides marked along my foot, along my plate, the edge of the foot here where I want longer seams, but there would be my straight stitch. When I'm ready to remove the fabric, I want the needle up, of course, so I'll turn the hand wheel to bring the needle
selection
to the highest
hieroglyphics
position,
rejected by the
but
safety
even more
system.
important, to bring this take-up lever to the highest position so that I'm sure that my stitch has been completely formed, and then when I raise my presser foot, it's very easy to pull those threads out. Have you ever had a bunch of threads coming out? That's because the take-up lever isn't all the way up. You have a thread cutter on the back of the presser bar that makes it easy to cut that thread after you've sewn your seam. And there would be your straight
Bobbin is
seam.
a pin or spool around
Now,
which
this
thread
seam
or
would
yarn
actually
is
pull
wound.
out if we don't do
1520s
something
from
at
the
the
French
beginning and the
bobine,
end. And that's
small
where
instrument
reverse
used in
comes
sewing
in.
or tapestry
Instant
making.
reverse. You don't have to
A
start
word of
right
uncertain
at the
origin,
edge of a
perhaps
fabric
from Latin
ever.
bulbus,
Start in about 1/8 of an
as
inch.
in babble or
And by the
bobble.
way, always start with those threads under the presser foot and toward the back, and many times I even just take a hold of them as I start to sew. I'll start to sew my straight stitch, but to tie it off or knot it, I'm going to press firmly down on the
so it's
instant reverse.
uncertain.
As long as
But
I'm
one
holding
theory
that
is that it
reverse
comes
down,
from the Latin
my machine is
balbus,
sewing
which is
backwards.
cognate with babble.
So you will then be knotting
the
off or
stuttering,
tying off
stammering
at the beginning
noise it-
by taking
this
a
sewing
reverse
instrument
stitch.
made. Going ba 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 ba
Now,
ba ba
should
ba.
you want to change directions as you're sewing,
So it
it's
got called
called
a bobbin.
pivoting. We would turn the needle, and remember to turn that hand wheel always toward you. Turn the needle until it's in the fabric, raise the presser foot, turn the fabric, lower the presser foot, and we're ready to sew again. And when you get to the end of that seam, again, press down on that reverse, and as long as you're holding it down, it will reverse stitch. Now we're ready to remove fabric. Take-up lever is up, and we simply pull our fabric out, and there we've done our tie-off stitch and pivoting. One other thing I really like this reversing for is if you have a hole. Here's a pair of jeans that I've actually cut a hole in, but I wouldn't be surprised if you might see some at your house. And this is what the free arm is so great for. You can slide those jeans, that leg, right over the free arm. To stitch over the little hole in our jeans, we simply lower the presser foot, stitch forward, and when we've crossed over the hole, press down on the reverse button. Let it up, let it back and forth by pressing up and down on the reverse button. And you'll see that you can actually mend over a tear with thread in table linens, in dish towels, in towels, and also in a pair of jeans like we have here. Raise that take-up lever to the top, pull it out, and you
This
see
is
how
surprisingly
we have
mesmerizing
mended our
because
hole
we've been
with
watching
stitching.
for 15 minutes, and I had
Now,
no
another
idea.
thing that the
it had
straight
been
stitch
that
is
long.
used for is putting in zippers. And
Do we
with
wanna
your
fast
right,
forward a
you
little bit and
received
see
a
where-
zipper foot. You'll notice I'm not going to
don't know if
show
she
how
told
to
us her
put
name,
in a zipper.
but I'm
I
gonna
hope you'll
call her
sign up
Jean
for a
or
sewing
Beverly.
class at your local
One of those,
store for
one of
that.
those. She's
But
definitely
with
a
the
Jean or a
standard
Bev.
foot, we can't get real close
yeah,
to
let's
those
see
zipper
where, let's see where
teeth.
she's going with this. This is a full instructional guide for your sewing machine, which we can watch if people are into it. But we can also just have a brief sample and then find something with less distorted audio. Are the feed dogs on the foot? I thought they were on the machine somewhere. That they're like an internal mechanism somewhere. I don't know anything. Uh, 25 minutes. All right, Beverly Jean.
For you, showing the different lengths of zigzag stitch. These are different widths of stitch. So we'll move to a different piece of fabric, and when we sew on a single weight with any kind of a decorative stitch,
You're the man now,
or
dog.
any kind
You're
of
the
a
man
wide
now,
stitch,
dog.
it's
You're
best
the
to use
man
one
now,
of the
dog.
tearaway stabilizers underneath so that you don't get any puckering or tunneling of the fabric. So let's leave our stitch at the wide width and leave our length for the beginning at about a 2. But as I change the length from 2 to 3 to 4, you'll notice that my zigzag stitch gets very far apart. Now this could be used decoratively, it could be used for finishing, but the place that I would use our zigzag the most, I think, is for satin stitching.
Midwesterners.
And that's a very, very short
Where would you place
stitch
her
length.
accent?
So now as I'm sewing, I'm changing my stitch length
Is it Wisconsin?
down into
Is
the
it
1
Illinois?
and
Is it
down
Michigan?
into this
Is it
pink
Ohio?
range, which is what we call a satin stitch range. And let's take a look at that
In
stitch.
which of those
There you
places
see
do
a
they say
very,
far
very dense
for far?
stitch. Now, we've changed it from
All
very
of them?
long to very short. If this stitch builds up too much as an applique, our standard foot doesn't want to feed over it because it's very flat on the bottom or underside of the foot. So let's take a look at some appliques so we know what we're talking about. Here you see an applique that's done with a more open zigzag. And by the way, this pillow is another one of the projects on the White website at whitesewing.com. You could take a pillow and add an applique. You could take a blouse that you already own and add a pretty little applique. And here you see that very satiny stitch. You'll want to experiment with some different types of thread. For many types of decorative work, the rayon, silvery, kind of sulky looking threads that have a lot of shine to them are the ones that you'll use for the prettiest satin stitch.
Like
You have a
R
wonderful foot with
R.
your new white called the special purpose or the applique foot or decorative foot, which has a tunnel on the underside. That means that because it has a little tunnel, it'll feed over that buildup of stitches. I'm going to snap that on, and you'll notice because it's a transparent foot, you can see a lot better as you stitch around your heart. Don't push or pull the fabric. Let your beautiful white sewing machine feed it as you sew, and then simply satin stitch all the way around the applique. Well, the next thing that I'd like to actually talk about is the buttonhole. You know, a buttonhole actually is a satin stitch. And in this case, we have a simple buttonhole on your beautiful white sewing machine. We're going to dial the picture of the buttonhole, which is actually shown in pink, and it compares to the pink here, and it says step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Obviously, we want to start with step 1. And our stitch length for the buttonhole needs to be short so that it's a satin stitch. Again, I would always make a sample buttonhole before I would go to making buttonholes on the garment. But we'll set the actual stitch length in the buttonhole range. Do you see where it says BH? And it's color-coded to be the pink area of the stitch length dial. Now, you have a great buttonhole foot that has come with your white, and you simply snap off the foot you have on the machine and snap on that buttonhole foot. And in this case, we are going to snap it on with the white blank back there, the little red marking lines to the front. Now, the neat thing is we can actually determine the size of our buttonhole by laying the button on the foot, and you'll notice the little red lines. We would pick the line next
Haley,
after the button. I usually
foot?
pick the one more unless it's a really thick button.
What
so
is
I'm
the
going to be
butthole
sewing
foot
to
used
this line as I stitch my buttonhole. Place the fabric underneath. Before you lower the presser foot, be sure the foot is pulled all the way forward. And then simply lower the presser foot
sewing buttholes
and begin
completely shut.
sewing. And now you will be sewing in step 1 the left side of the buttonhole. And you sew until the little red mark on the moving part, which is actually, or not on the moving part, on the needle part.
I know what you
right
meant.
at the
I just
needle,
found it
comes to the line
very
that
amusing.
you had as the length of your buttonhole, or the length of your button, too. Now, before you do any changes, when
YouTube
you've reached
poops are
that
back in
mark,
style,
be
right.
sure you take the hand wheel and raise the needle
definitely
out of
make
the
a-
fabric. If you don't do
Just
that,
rip
when
this
you
whole
change
video,
your
but
settings, what's
take
gonna
out the
happen
middle
is
syllable
the
every
needle
time
will
she says
shift the fabric,
buttonhole.
and then your buttonhole will be crooked.
For
so
a
this
real-
is easy.
a
Just
real juvenile
raise the
laugh.
needle out. Now go to your stitch dial. We've already completed step 1, which is the left column of the buttonhole. Now we're ready for step 2, which is the bar tack. And so I'll step on the foot control and take 3 or 4 stitches. We don't want too many. If you get too big a hump there of stitching, you won't be able to feed back over it. So 3 or 4 stitches, zigzag, zigzag, and then raise the needle again before you change the dial. And now we will go from step 2 to step 3. So once you've changed to step 3, go ahead and sew, and automatically your right will reverse the stitching and will sew the right column of the buttonhole. Okay, when you get back where you started, the foot will stop moving. Be sure your needle is raised out of the fabric, and set your buttonhole setting to step 4. Step 4, of course, is the same as step 2. It's the bar tack at the end. And you want to take a few bar tacks. What I often do is go back to straight stitch and just stitch in place a little bit just to tie off my buttonhole. But you will see now that we have a beautiful buttonhole. With a little practice, do some scraps, and you will be able to do beautiful buttonholes like this too. I'm going to show you one more trick for buttonholes because of the fact that buttonholes tend to get stretched out sometimes on knits and things. So we'll do a corded buttonhole. And for this we'll use a heavy thread or a fine yarn. And we'll actually loop that over that little tiny finger that's at the back of that white foot. You can see that there. And now we'll come and slip our fabric underneath. And what we'll do is make sure the foot's pulled forward, lower the presser foot. Now we need to be sure we're set back on the actual stitch. So we go back to the buttonhole setting. We're going to do column 1 first, okay? Lay those cords straight and go ahead and sew. And magically, that column is going to stitch, that satin stitch buttonhole column, right over that cording. Ready again now to do the bar tack. Be sure the needle's out. Set your buttonhole step 2. Take 3 or 4 stitches at the end for the bar tack. Set then buttonhole step 3. And now we want to be sure we're over the cord. You can do that with your hand if you turn the hand wheel. Sure enough, it's magic because the foot's made to make it happen. We stitch that side of the buttonhole, and then we go to step 4 and stitch the end of the buttonhole. And now we have cording actually in our buttonhole. You have to pull it to the back so it pulls off the cording. We have cording actually in our buttonhole. Just pull up that loop and tie these ends off to the other side of your fabric, and you'll have a very sturdy corded buttonhole. Well, now that we have buttonholes, we have to sew on a button. And I usually like to tape my button in place. I'll actually take my button and tape it onto the fabric with one of the magic tapes, because then it won't shift around on me when I'm trying to sew through it. I'm going to use the button sewing foot, and that was included with your white.
So many things are getting
simply snap in place
for me
the
today,
button sewing
but
foot.
not butthole foot.
And one thing when you're snapping these feet on, be sure you don't catch the threads in the actual little ankle there. That can happen. Threads under the foot and to the back. Now we line up the button foot onto the button that's been taped in place. There's one more thing we have to do here that's really important. When we're sewing, the fabric's moving. When we sew on a button, we don't want it to move. So I'm going to actually open the bobbin door, because hidden behind that bobbin door is another little lever that's called the feed teeth drop. Now these are the feed teeth. They make the fabric move. When I push that lever down, the feed teeth are gone. They're lowered down, and now when I want to sew on a button, my button's going to stay in place. The stitch for button sewing is a zigzag that'll sew from hole to hole. And I can tell you that most buttons will be the 3 millimeter or the middle size zigzag, but boy, don't take a chance. What I suggest is that you lower the presser foot and take the needle and make sure that you're lined up with the holes like I'm doing here. This is a different button than what I practiced with, and you know what? The holes are further apart, and so I may need to go to a 4 millimeter zigzag. So you line up the holes in the button with the swing of the zigzag needle. Your stitch length really can be set anywhere because that controls the feed teeth. And truthfully, those feed teeth aren't functioning. They're down now. I put those 2 holes on. This is a 4-hole button. I'd actually be done if I was only on a 2-hole button. But since this is a 4-hole button, I'm going to move to the next 2 holes. And again, I'm going to line up that hole And with a little practice, you're going to find that you can do this really quickly and really easily. Again, always walk it through with your hand before you do it with the foot control. Otherwise, you're liable to hit the button and break the needle usually. All right, once you've stitched it, again, I like to go back to a straight stitch. You'll need to make sure that you're lined up with the hole to take that straight stitch, but take a few straight stitches in place. And I'll tell you, if you have not liked sewing on buttons, and maybe your buttons come off when you sew them on by hand, I guarantee you this button is going to stay put. So get rid of those extra little threads that we trimmed, and get rid of our tape, and you have a button that's there to stay. All right, another sewing job that a lot of people have done by hand for many years, and they'd like to be able to do by machine quicker, is actually hemming garments. And we can blind hem very easily with our white sewing machine. We'll snap on the blind hem foot. And again, it goes on like so, just clipped right into the little pin, put the threads under the foot into the back before we start to sew. When we do a blind hem, we actually fold the fabric as a hem at the ironing board is where I usually do this, and we press it well, and we put our pins in perpendicular to the hem. So it's a little bit different than when we pin a hem like this. Those pins would be in the way. We need them perpendicular because we're going to be folding this again. I like to take the first, what I call bite of the pin, the first place the pin goes in, about 1/4 inch from the edge of the hem. And so now we take and turn that hem. This is the wrong side. Let's do this together. This is the wrong side of the hem. We're actually turning the hem under toward the right side of the garment, and we're leaving an extension of the hem sticking out. We're going to sew on that extension with what's called a blind hem stitch. Simply turn the dial to the picture of the blind hem stitch, which is a straight stitch and then a zig over, a straight stitch and then a zig over. We've got to remember to bring up those feed teeth, or we're not going to go anywhere. And I hope this doesn't ever happen to you, but there have been times that I've been sewing and I put them down and then forget to bring them up, and then I can't move. So if ever your fabric isn't feeding, that's the first thing to check. We also want to set our stitch length at about 2.5 for blind hem. I've snapped on the blind hem foot. I want to give you some tips on that, but as I place the foot underneath, or the fabric underneath the foot, you'll notice that there's a little guide on the foot. I call it a flange. It's a little guide that's going to ride along the spot where the fabric is folded back. I think you can see that. That little flange rides right along this edge. And as we sew now, it's going to stitch a straight stitch either right off the hem, which is what I'm doing now, or we can stitch it right on the hem and then the zigzag jumps over. Now you'll notice that this foot is adjustable. Let's get too much bite for a minute and show what happens. If we sew with that foot adjusted so that that swing grabs way over, we're going to see that stitch on the right side. So we adjust the foot so that the fold of the fabric, and you can test this by hand walking the stitch through, so that the fold of the fabric is just barely caught by the swing of the needle. So as we sew now, it would catch way too much there. We're going to move it closer so that it's going to catch very little fabric and now become a perfect blind hem as we sew. And here again, you can get really good at adjusting this foot so that you're just barely catching the fabric as you stitch that blind hem. You'll see now that when we look at this from the wrong side, we of course see those stitches on the hem allowance on the wrong side with that zigzag jumping over to catch on the right side. But when we look at the right side, we see barely little catches of stitching, except where we had it adjusted with the foot catching too much. Now that we've done a blind hem, let's talk a little bit about finishing seams. I'm actually going to snap off my blind hem foot and snap on the standard foot. Maybe for garment sewing in the past, you've used a zigzag when you wanted to keep things from fraying. I think we've got some good tips for you. For example, after you cut out a garment, or maybe this is a garment that you have purchased and some of the seams are fraying away and you need to finish them. Well, the 3-step zigzag or multiple zigzag is really the best stitch choice to keep those edges not only finished from fraying, but also laying flat. So the first thing we'll do is select our 3-step zigzag stitch. It looks kind of like a zigzag, but it's got 3 little straight stitches in each zig and 3 little straight stitches in each zag. And then we'll select a stitch length appropriate for finishing the edges of seams. And that would be somewhere around 1 or just a little bit less, quite a short stitch length. Now here's a piece of fabric that really could use some help because it's got quite a bit of fraying here. So to prevent that fraying, we'll place it under the presser foot so that the needle is going to swing to the right and get near or off the edge. And now as I stitch, you'll see that where a zigzag would tend to pull that edge up and actually roll it or pucker it, this 3-step zigzag is going to keep it laying flatter. Plus, what I love about it is that it's going to give 3 little stitches catching all those fibers, so you're not going to get nearly the fraying. If you have a few threads hanging off, which I did before I started, just trim those away, those little extra frayed stitches, and now you'll see that this is firmly stitched and won't be fraying anymore, and then you can go forth and sew your seams with finished seams with your straight stitch and press them open. And you'll have nice finished seams on your finished garment. Another thing I really like the 3-step zigzag for is mending, and I have a patch on these jeans. This patch is actually from a contrasting fabric, but it could just as well have been a chunk of a pair of old jeans. When you have a big hole in jeans, that darning isn't going to work. So cut a patch, lay it on, and 3-step zigzag all the way around the edge to hold it in place, and you'll see that that will be a very firm mend on jeans and other garments that have large holes. Well, better than finishing a seam and pressing it open, which is what we were just doing, what about being able to sew the seam and finish it all in one step? You have a special stitch on your new white just for that. And so we'll turn the stitch dial 1 stitch to select the seam overcast stitch. And this is actually a seam overcast stitch for knits and for wovens, and it will sew the seam and finish it all in one step. So I have kind of a sweatshirt fabric here. I love this for sweatshirts. And I'm going to place it underneath the foot, ready to sew. But because this is a stretch stitch, there's one thing we need to remember that's very important. The stitch length has to be at the longest setting. Now guess what? There's a little code to remind you of that. Because here you see the little dot with the circle. That means turn the stitch length dial to the dot with the circle. A stretch stitch or forward and back stitch, which you're just lucky enough to have here, means that you're going to use that stretch stitch setting. And so now as we begin to sew, you will see that our stitch sews and overcasts the edge all in one. You can sew at the 1/4-inch edge, or you can sew in from the edge and trim it later. It's really your choice. But what this is going to do, even on this thick, thick fabric, it's going to sew this, and we could come back and trim off any excess seam allowance. It's going to give us a very stretchy seam. This will not break on this fabric in any way, and yet a very sturdy seam for any type of particularly active wear garments that you're making or other sewing. The other place I just love this stitch is for ribbing. And again, this video is to teach you how to use the stitches and what they're used for and all the stitch functions. If you haven't done any sewing of stretch garments or t-shirts or swimwear, sign up for a class, because those things are easy to sew, and you'll find that your new white will handle those fabrics beautifully. So here you see we would sew our ribbing, and when you take that class, you're going to find out that you stretch the ribbing around the neckline, and you'll see that we will have finished ribbing virtually just like store-bought. Okay, we'll take a look at that ribbing now, and you'll see not only is it a very, very strong seam that's not going to break when you pull that ribbing over your head or over your foot or arm, but you'll see that it's a very nice finished seam on the inside of your ribbed garment as well. And that's all done with that great stretch seam overcast stitch on your new white. You have another special stretch stitch, and that's actually the straight stretch stitch, or I like to call it also the reinforced straight stitch. Of course, it's intended for stretch fabric so that when you pull it, it wouldn't break. So I've dialed that straight stretch stitch on the stitch dial, and of course it has that little mark to show us that it is a stretch stitch, and so the length needs to be set all the way to 4. If you set the length somewhere in here with any of these stretch stitches, you won't have any feed. You'll be just sitting in one place. So be sure that you set that length to 4. But now you could mend crotch seams on pants and trousers. You could stitch seams on knitwear. Because the stitch stitches forward one and then back one, it's a very, very strong stitch, and it's going to hold through anything. This is one, if you don't know it's going to fit, I would baste it first, because this would be a real hard one to pull out. But it's a very sturdy stitch that you're not going to tear or break on your garment. So use it for mending and also for construction. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about top stitching. We can do top stitching and decorative stitching with something special that's called a twin needle. Now, twin needles actually replace the standard needle. They are 2 needles on one what's called shank. And they come in different sizes, meaning different widths between the needle, and also in different sizes for weights of fabric, like any sewing machine needle. They come for stretch fabrics, that's what the blue means, and they come for regular fabrics, that's what the red means. And so we're going to remove our standard needle, and this is real easy to do. If it's in there real tight the first time, use your screwdriver, and there's a little notch in the needle clamp screw, which is over here to the side. I've had the needle out already, so I know I can turn that with my hand. I loosen that screw and simply pull the needle down and get rid of it. And actually, I would throw my needle away if I've been using it, because I would want to replace it with a new needle. New needle for every project. And anytime you're having any kind of a glitch, I always say change your needle and rethread. Generally, that'll solve it. All right, we insert the twin needle the same way we insert a standard needle. And that is to take that needle and to push it up as far as it will go in. But we want to notice that there's a flat side on that shank. The flat side goes to the back. So insert the needle, push it up as far as it will go, and then tighten the screw to hold it in place. We have only one bobbin with twin needle sewing, so we don't need to do anything down in the bobbin area, but we do want to put a second thread on the top. So we have one to thread through each of the needles. So in this case, I'm going to pull up my second spool pin, which is right there, and I'm going to put my second thread in place, and I normally have one thread reeling off the back of the spool and one thread reeling off the front of the spool. This thread is threaded just as we threaded in the beginning of the tape, with one exception. Here at the tension discs, one goes on one side of the tension disc and the other goes on the other side. All right? Again, we go into the take-up. If you've forgotten how to thread, go back to the first part of the tape and just review that with yourself. And I have found it's easier to thread this guide that's at the bottom of the faceplate by opening that door just a little bit. There we go. Now we thread the 2 needles. One thread goes into one needle, the other thread goes into the other needle. What the twin needle gives you that's so great is the opportunity to sew every single one of your stitches and many of your stitch functions in another way. Actually, 2 rows of it perfectly stitched side by side. Okay, now for twin needle sewing, the first thing we would want to do would be to actually select a straight stitch for that straight row of stitching we're going to sew. And I'm going to use just a standard fabric, but because we're actually doing a stitching on a single thickness, I have stabilizer underneath that. So we'll take and put that underneath the presser foot, lower the presser foot, straight stitch, and we'll start to sew. Now we've got a very long stitch length, but let's take a look at what that looks like. We may want to shorten up the stitch length for this top stitching. Remember, you have that option always. And I would always start by experimenting on scraps before you sew anything. But look at that, 2 rows of stitching, perfectly side by side. I mean, you can't beat that, can you? When you do it without stabilizer underneath, you will get what we call pin tucks. And this is another of the stitch functions on your machine. A straight stitch with no stabilizer, and generally this would be at about a 2.5 stitch length. And you would sew row after row, and what would happen, because there's no stabilizer underneath, you'll get a little bit of a tucking up of that fabric to create that little pin tuck, we call it. Remember, this would be a great hem on a knit fabric because there's only one bobbin. And for that reason, you have a zigzag stitch going back and forth back there, so you have a little bit of elasticity to the stitch for hemming on a knit. Now, can you use other stitches with free needle? You sure can.
Very crunchy
no
on
problem.
This one,
We're going
just
to
had a
try
hot
some
mic.
of our other stitches. Let's set our zigzag, because that would be the main one that we would use. But let's point out that our zigzags are different widths. Remember how that needle would swing from side to side? And as we would swing from side to side, we want to be sure that we're not too wide to be sewing twin needle with our decorative zigzag. So be sure of that as you're sewing. If you go to the 3 or 4 width, let me show you what will happen. As you swing, you're liable to get too close to that foot. So stick with those narrower widths, turn it with the hand wheel first, and the different widths of needles will mean it will look different too. Now that you've learned about all these great stitch functions for sewing, we have one more kind of sewing that's very creative, and that's free motion sewing. Free motion meaning you move the fabric. Let's see how to do that. First thing we're going to do, I've actually rethreaded with a standard needle, a regular sewing needle, and I've threaded the top and the needle with the silky pretty thread. In the bobbin, I have a fine weight white thread because you're not going to see that in embroidery unless somebody's looking at the backside. And we will now take off the presser foot. In other words, not only the foot, but the actual ankle. Take everything off so that you have just the needle exposed. I often remove the screw too if I'm going to do a big project, just so it isn't there in my way as I'm moving the fabric. And then one more very important thing, since we're going to be moving the fabric, we're going to drop those feed teeth again. They will be out of the way, and we're ready to begin. Let's start with a straight stitch. That's called seed stitch embroidery. The stitch length really doesn't matter because the feed teeth are down. But if you put it on 0, they won't be moving so much, so they'll be out of the way and not moving under there. We are going to put our fabric in a hoop. And this actually is a spring hoop designed for machine sewing. You could certainly use any embroidery hoop you have at home as long as it'll slide under the ankle, and there is a lot of room there. Be sure to use stabilizer underneath your work, and sometimes you'll put this actually in the hoop. You can try it both ways. And this is one time that I would suggest that you bring up that bobbin thread before you begin sewing. Okay, that would be important. For free motion sewing, there's one more thing I'd recommend, and that is that you use that great extension or flatbed sewing surface. In other words, bring that in and slide it in place because you're going to want to have the larger surface for you to be sewing on as you help to move your fabric yourself. All right, we're ready to begin sewing, but we've got to remember the most important thing in free motion sewing. We talked about this before, and that is if you don't lower the presser
Don't stab the needle
foot,
into your foot.
you won't have any tension on the thread. And if that happens, you're going to have threads all gobbled underneath because there's no tension. I will tell you that's the hardest thing to remember in free motion is to lower the presser foot because there's no foot going down, just the bar. But it's not the bar that it's important. It's those discs up here that are closing down on the thread and giving tension. So I usually write a little note up here, lower presser foot, when I'm doing free motion sewing, so I'm sure to remember that. Lower that presser foot, engage the tension, and now you can simply sew. But if you don't move the fabric, nothing is going to happen. It won't go anywhere. You see, it'll just sit in one place. Now when you have a straight stitch like I have now, you have like a line that you can use to actually write with, to draw with. You can do cursive lettering. You can do fun things. Now if you see that lighter color bobbin thread coming up, often with decorative sewing like this, we might lower the top tension just slightly, maybe to a 3 or so. And again, you'd want to experiment with this before you'd be doing your garment. So that's straight stitch embroidery and monogramming. But now you have all these wonderful different zigzags to use. So simply set whatever size zigzag you want, and now you will have a zigzag. And here again, I'm moving that fabric as I'm sewing. And you'll see that we are seeing some of that white thread. And so if we're doing that with our zigzag stitch, we would actually lower that top thread tension just a little bit more. Less tension on the top, more tension on the bottom means that we have more pull on the bobbin. You can actually fill in places. In this case, you could do it like so, or you can, as we did before, use a wider width of zigzag and write a letter to monogram. Free motion embroidery is something that takes some practice. There's no question. You don't want to turn your hoop. You just want to move it. You want to run this machine at a comfortable speed for you. I like to do my own initials because I've done a lot of them and I've practiced it, but you will want to practice with free motion embroidery and take a class if this is something that you're particularly interested in. Now, a very forgiving free motion embroidery, I'm going to take this one out, and we'll talk a little bit about stippling. This is one of those white website projects. Stippling is very popular in quilting, where you just use that straight stitch and you're kind of using the needle as a pencil to draw lots of little squiggly lines. But there's a difference with most stippling, and that is that there's batting involved. So what we're going to do is have batting underneath, and we will actually hoop our fabric and our batting. By the way, I didn't talk about this with the applique. This stabilizer just tears away after you've created your project, and then you press it. So don't be afraid to just rip that off. Now, we've got batting, and we've got fabric, and for stippling, it's just kind of like puzzle drawing. So we'll go back to that straight stitch setting. Again, we're going to bring up that bobbin thread before we start, and we do that by bringing the bobbin thread up the same way we brought it up after we threaded. But keep it on the top because it's a little easier to work with. You're going to know where it is. Now, we simply to stipple, use that straight stitch and go back and forth. And once you get started, it's a good practice to take and cut those threads and get them out of the way. This is sort of like drawing little puzzle shapes. And in true stippling, and I did remember to put that down, I didn't remember to put that down. Be sure to put that presser foot down or your stitch quality will be terrible. So you want to be sure and put that presser foot down and sew that stippling. And the rule in stippling is that you shouldn't ever cross over the lines. But my rule is just have fun with it. Just do whatever you feel like looks good. If you want to do curly cues, go ahead and do curly cues. Again, practice a little bit with some of these techniques. Practice with your sewing machine. Sewing is not something that you learn overnight, but it is such a wonderful, fun hobby to be enjoying. We hope that you've gotten a lot of ideas of ways to use your new white sewing machine. And we hope, too, that you will take some classes, visit all the sewing stores in your area, make new friends, make new sewing friends, read books, read some of the sewing publications, and be sure to visit the white website. The other thing we want to be sure you know is that you should take good care of your sewing machine and have it tuned up regularly at your local sewing machine store. Keep it dusted, change the needle, brush the lint out of the bobbin area. That's really all the care that's required for your white. Well, until next time, I wish to all of you happy sewing.
Ooh, that was crunchy. That was very crunchy. I hope y'all enjoyed learning how to sew. I certainly did. And thank you, Trill, for sending that in. Y'all are troopers for sticking in there with that audio. Okay. All right. It's time now. It's time now for the tape we've been putting off. Let's see. It's 25 minutes from 1985, narrated by Meryl Streep. It's The Velveteen Rabbit. Let's do it. I have never read or seen this story. It looks so cute and charming. I've been writing code for these first two tapes, but I figure this one I can be here for.
It's gonna get dark soon.
Told by Meryl Streep. I'm so excited for Meryl Streep.
Once, there was a Velveteen Rabbit, and in the beginning he was really splendid. He was fat and bunchy, just as a rabbit should be. His coat was brown and white and was very soft. He had real thread whiskers, and his ears were lined with pink satin. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking, with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. Of course, there were other toys that Christmas, nuts and oranges and a toy engine, and chocolate almonds and a clockwork mouse. But the rabbit was quite the best of all. For at least 2 hours, the boy loved him. And then aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of tissue paper and unwrapping of parcels, and in the excitement of looking at all the new presents, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten.
I didn't know this was a Christmas story.
For a long time, he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about him. He was naturally shy, and being only made of velveteen, some of the more expensive toys made fun of him. The mechanical toys, like the model train, were very stuck up and boasted that they were real. But the rabbit could not claim to be a model of anything, for he didn't know that real rabbits existed. He thought they were all stuffed with sawdust, like himself, and he understood that sawdust was quite out of date. Even Timothy, the jointed wooden lion, who was made by disabled soldiers and should have had broader views, put on airs. Between them all, the poor little rabbit was made to feel very insignificant and commonplace, and the only person who was kind to him at all was the skin horse. The skin horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath, and most of the hairs in his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away. He knew that they were only toys, and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the skin horse, understand all about it. What is real? asked the rabbit one day. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt?" Sometimes, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or who have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. I suppose you are real?" And then he wished he had not said it, for he thought the Skin Horse might be sensitive. But the Skin Horse only smiled. "The boy's uncle made me real. That was a great many years ago. But once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts for always." The rabbit sighed. He thought it would be a long time before this magic called real happened to him. He longed to become real, to know what it felt like. And yet the idea of growing shabby and losing his eyes and whiskers was rather sad. He wished that he could become it without these uncomfortable things happening to him. There was a person called Nana who ruled the nursery. Sometimes she took no notice of the playthings lying about, and sometimes, for no reason whatever, she went swooping about like a great wind and hustled them away in cupboards. She called this tidying up, and the playthings all hated it, especially the tin ones. The rabbit didn't mind it so much, for wherever he was thrown, he came down soft. One evening, when the boy was going to bed, he couldn't find the china dog that always slept with him. Nana was in a hurry, and it was too much trouble to hunt for china dogs, and seeing that the toy cupboard door stood open, she made a swoop. "Here, take your old bunny. He'll do to sleep with you." That night, and for many nights after, the Velveteen Rabbit slept in the boy's bed. At first he found it rather uncomfortable, for the boy hugged him very tight, and sometimes he rolled over on him, and sometimes he pushed him so far under the pillow that the rabbit could scarcely breathe. And he missed his talks with the Skin Horse during those long moonlight hours in the nursery, when all the house was silent. But very soon he grew to like it, for the boy used to talk to him, and made nice tunnels for him under the bedclothes, and they had splendid games together in whispers. And when the boy dropped off to sleep, the rabbit would snuggle down close under his little warm chin and dream, with the boy's hands clasped close around him all night long. And so time went on, and the little rabbit was very happy. So happy that he never noticed how his beautiful velveteen fur was getting shabbier and shabbier, and his tail was coming unsewn, and all the pink rubbed off his nose where the boy had kissed him. Spring came, and they had long days in the garden, for wherever the boy went, the rabbit went too. He had rides in the wheelbarrow, and picnics on the grass, and lovely fairy huts built for him under the raspberry canes behind the flower border. One time the boy was called away suddenly, and the little rabbit was left out on the lawn until long after dusk. Nana had to come and look for him with the candle, because the boy was so worried about the rabbit he couldn't go to sleep unless the rabbit was safely home. He was wet through with the dew and quite earthy from diving into the burrows the boy had made for him in the flower bed. Nana grumbled. "You must have your old bunny. Fancy all the fuss for a toy." "Give me my bunny." "You mustn't say that. He isn't a toy. He's real." When the little rabbit heard that, he was happy, for he knew what the skin horse had said was true at last. The nursery magic had happened to him, and he was a toy no longer. He was real. The boy himself had said it. That night, he was almost too happy to sleep, and so much love stirred in his little sawdust heart that it almost burst. And into his boot-button eyes, that had long ago lost their polish, there came a look of wisdom and beauty, so that even Nana noticed it next morning when she picked him up and said, "I declare if that old bunny hasn't got quite a knowing expression." That was a wonderful summer. Near the house where they lived, there was a wood, and in the long June evenings the boy liked to go there with the Velveteen Rabbit to play. And each day, before the boy wandered off to pick flowers or play at brigands among the trees, he made the rabbit a little nest among the bracken. He was a kind-hearted little boy, and he liked Bunny to be comfortable. One evening, the rabbit was sitting there alone watching the ants. Suddenly, he saw two strange beings creep out of the tall bracken near him. They were rabbits like himself, but quite furry and brand new. They must have been very well made, for their seams didn't show at all, and they changed shape in a queer way when they moved. One minute they were long and thin, and the next minute fat and bunchy, instead of always staying the same like he did. They stared at him, and the little rabbit stared back, and all the time their noses twitched. "Why don't you get up and play with us?" one of them asked. "I don't feel like it," said the rabbit, for he didn't want to explain that he had no clockwork. "I don't believe you can." I can. I can jump higher than anything." He meant when the boy threw him, but of course he didn't want to say so. "Can you hop on your hind legs?" That was a dreadful question, for the Velveteen Rabbit had no hind legs at all. He sat still in the bracken and hoped that the other rabbits wouldn't notice. "I don't want to," he said again, "but the wild rabbits have very sharp eyes." And this one stretched out his neck and looked. "He hasn't got any hind legs." And he began to laugh. I have got hind legs. I'm sitting on them." "Then stretch them out and show me like this." And he began to whirl about and dance. I don't like dancing. I'd rather sit still." But all the while he was longing to dance, for a funny new tickly feeling ran through him, and he felt he would give anything in the world to be able to jump about like these rabbits did. The strange rabbit stopped dancing and came quite close. "He doesn't smell right. He isn't a rabbit at all. He isn't real." "I am real. I am real. The boy said so." And he nearly began to cry. Just then there was a sound of footsteps, and the boy ran past near them, and with a stamp of feet and a flash of white tails, the two strange rabbits disappeared. Come back and play with me! Oh, do come back. I know I am real. But there was no answer. The Velveteen Rabbit was all alone. Oh, dear. Why did they run away like that? Why couldn't they stay and talk to me? For a long time he sat very still, watching the bracken and hoping that they would come back. But they never returned, and presently the sun sank lower and the little white moths fluttered out, and the boy came and carried him home. Weeks passed, and the little rabbit grew very old and shabby, but the boy loved him just as much. He loved him so hard that he loved all his whiskers off, and the pink lining to his ears turned grey. He even began to lose his shape, and he scarcely looked like a rabbit any more, except to the boy. To him he was always beautiful, and that was all that the little rabbit cared about. He didn't mind how he looked to other people, because the nursery magic had made him real, and when you are real, shabbiness doesn't matter. And then, one day, the boy was ill. His face grew very flushed, and he talked in his sleep, and his little body was so hot that it burned the little rabbit when he held him close. Strange people came and went in the nursery, and a light burned all night, and through it all the little Velveteen Rabbit sat guard and never stirred. It was a long, weary time, for the boy was too ill to play, but he knew that the boy needed him. And while the boy lay half asleep, the little rabbit crept up close to the pillow and whispered all sorts of delightful plans for when the boy would be well again. They would go out in the garden among the flowers and butterflies and play splendid games in the raspberry thicket, just the way they used to. At last, the fever turned, and the boy got better. He was able to sit up in bed and look at picture books, while the little rabbit cuddled close at his side. And one day they let him get up and dress. They had carried the boy out onto the balcony, wrapped in a shawl. The little rabbit sat tangled up among the bedclothes, listening. The boy was going to the seaside tomorrow. Everything was arranged, and now it only remained to carry out the doctor's orders. The room was to be disinfected, and all the books and toys that the boy had played with in the bed must be burnt. Hooray, thought the little rabbit. Tomorrow we shall go to the seashore. Just then, Nana caught sight of him. How about his old bunny? That, said the doctor. Why, it's a mass of scarlet fever germs. Burn it at once. What? Nonsense. Get him a new one. He mustn't have that any more. So, the little rabbit was put into a sack with the old picture books and a lot of rubbish, and carried out to the end of the garden behind the fowl house. That was a fine place to make a bonfire, only the gardener was too busy just then to attend to it. He had the potatoes to dig and the green peas to gather, but next morning he promised to come quite early and burn the whole lot. That night, the boy slept in a different bedroom, and he had a new bunny to sleep with him. It was a splendid bunny, all white plush with real glass eyes, But the boy was too excited to care very much about it. For tomorrow he was going to the seashore, and that in itself was such a wonderful thing that he could think of nothing else. And while the boy was asleep, the little rabbit lay among the old picture books in the corner behind the fowl house, and he felt very lonely. He was shivering a little, for he had always been used to sleeping in a nice warm bed, and by this time his coat had worn so thin and threadbare from hugging that it was no longer any protection to him. Nearby he could see the thicket of raspberry canes in whose shadow he had played with the boy on bygone mornings. He thought of those long sunlit hours in the garden. How happy they were, and a great sadness came over him. He seemed to see them all pass before him, each more beautiful than the other. The flower bed, the quiet evenings in the wood when he lay in the bracken and the little ants ran over his paws, the wonderful day when he first knew that he was real. And he thought of the skin horse, so wise and gentle, and all that he had told him. And a tear, a real tear, trickled down his little shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a wonderful thing happened. For where the tear had fallen grew a mysterious flower, not at all like any other that grew in the garden. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just sat there watching it. Then suddenly the blossom opened, and out stepped the loveliest fairy in the whole world. She came close to the little rabbit and gathered him up in her arms and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. "Little rabbit, don't you know who I am?" The rabbit looked up at her, and it seemed to him that he had seen her face before, but he couldn't think where. "I am the nursery magic fairy. I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out, and the children don't need them any more, then I come and take them away with me and turn them into real. Wasn't I real before? You were real to the boy because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone." And she held the little rabbit close in her arms and flew with him into the wood. It was light now, for the moon had risen. All the forest was beautiful, and the fronds of the bracken shone like frosted silver. In the open glade between the tree trunks, the wild rabbits danced with their shadows on the velvet grass. But when they saw the fairy, they all stopped dancing and stood round in a ring to stare at her. "I've brought you a new playfellow. You must be very kind to him and teach him all he needs to know in Rabbitland, for he is going to live with you forever and ever." And she kissed the little rabbit again. "Run and play, little rabbit." But the little rabbit sat quite still for a moment and never moved, for when he saw all the wild rabbits dancing around him, he remembered about his hind legs, and he didn't want them to see that he was made all in one piece. He did not know that when the fairy kissed him that last time, she had changed him altogether. And he might have sat there a very long time, too shy to move, if just then something hadn't tickled his nose. And before he thought what he was doing, he lifted his hind toe to scratch it. He actually had hind legs. Instead of dingy velveteen, he had brown fur, soft and shiny. His ears twitched by themselves, and his whiskers were so long that they brushed the grass. He gave one leap, and the joy of using those hind legs was so great that he went springing about the turf on them, jumping sideways and whirling around as the others did. He grew so excited that when at last he did stop to thank the fairy, she had gone. He was a real rabbit at last, at home with the other rabbits. Autumn passed, and winter. And in the spring, while the boy was out playing in the wood, 2 rabbits crept out and peeped at him. One of them was brown all over, but the other had markings under his fur, and about his little soft nose and his round black eyes there was something familiar, so that the boy thought to himself, "Why, he looks just like my old bunny that was lost when I had scarlet fever." But he never knew that it really was his own bunny, come back to look at the child who had first helped him to be real.
That was very, very sweet. Doodly-doo. Man, Meryl Streep was 36 when she did that. That was very lovely. I was moved. You'll have a limited amount of... What is a Golden Kappa train? We're at 75% on level 1 of Golden Kappa train. I do not understand Twitch. Alright, well, let's doodly-doo. Thank you, Will. This was very sweet. I thought it was going to be... Honestly, I thought it was going to be more schmaltzy than it was. I thought the boy was going to die and it was going to straight up be an allegory for losing someone who has cared for you. But no, it was the rabbit. It was the rabbit who had to be changed due to having loved the boy. Let's see. Oh, Slick Dude, thank you. Thank you for gifting us up. That's a Golden Kappa.
There's leaves and trash and paper and cash. They left it all in the gutter. So along comes Dusty singing this song with a chuckle, a snort, and a mutter. Oh, doodly, 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 doo. I'm keeping the street so clean. I'm scrubbing and scraping. I'm pavement landscaping. I'm buffing this place to a sheen. Now just to remember, January to December, I'm Dusty, the street sweeping gal. My brushes are metal. I'm in fine fettle with Mac, my big city pal. Oh, doodly, 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 doo. I'm keeping the street so clean. I'm scrubbing and scraping. I'm pavement landscaping. I'm buffing this place to a sheen.
Okay, and I have one more tape for you today. It is Jungie. Eyewitness Jungle. Thank you, Stars. Eyewitness Jungle. Why do rainforests harbor the greatest concentration of life in the world? What is their role in the Tree of Life? Narrated by Martin Sheen from 1994. It's Eyewitness Jungle. I believe this and Dog are the last two Eyewitness that I have on the shelf. I'll have to get Leica down here for Eyewitness Dog one of these days. But this will be our final tape for today. Hope you enjoy.
To find nature at its most exuberant, to see the greatest show of genetic diversity on Earth, one must go to the jungle. The tropical rainforest biodiversity is so vast that even today it remains largely unexplored. Of the hundreds of thousands of plant species that thrive here, scientists have only taken a close look at an estimated 1%. Over 50% of the world's known plant and animal species live on a mere 6% of the Earth's surface. A concentration of life only possible because of the rainforest's multi-layered habitats, nature's version of the high-rise. The watery basement, ground floor, understory, middle story, upper story or canopy, and the emergent zone. We may think of the rainforest as a faraway place, but we're surrounded by its products. 1 out of 4 purchases from our local pharmacists is derived from a rainforest plant. The greatest civilization to emerge from the rainforest, the Mayans, believed the world tree, or Wakachan, was the central axis holding underworld, earth, and heaven together. And from the Wakachan, all things flowed. The tree of life is rooted in many creation myths. From the Old Testament story comes the tree of knowledge, which offered Adam and Eve temptation. From Buddhism comes the tree of enlightenment, for it was under the fig tree that Buddha received enlightenment. Just as all things flowed from the Mayan world tree, so the rainforest offers much to the modern world. Knowledge, temptation, suffering, perhaps even a glimmer of enlightenment. Our fascination with rainforest is not new. In the 19th century, the Palm House in London's Kew Gardens was built to house tropical plants brought back by scientists and explorers. This squirrel monkey is from one of the wettest places on Earth, the South American rainforest. The tropical rainforest averages more than 80 inches of rain a year, yet can vary from 60 to 430 inches in the Hawaiian rainforest. That's up to 35 feet of rain a year. The average temperature remains at 81 degrees throughout the year. The temperature actually changes more from sunrise to sunset than it does from January to June, making evening the winter of the tropics. With so much heat and moisture, the rainforest is constantly recycling its water, like a giant water wheel lifting it into the sky and pouring it back down. 2/3 of the Earth's fresh water is recycled through the Amazon rainforest alone, like this enclosed terrarium, which makes use of the same water again and again. But the rainforest is more than a weather machine. It's a window into the dim past. With a climate that hasn't changed since the late Cretaceous period, it has served as a nursery for tens of millions of years of uninterrupted evolution. Some of these palm species originated over 60 million years ago. The Hoatzin, whose young have claws on their wings, resembles the earliest known birds. "45 million years ago, rainforest covered much of the Earth. Fossilized pollen grains from jungle trees have been found as far north as England. But the Earth's cooling climate pushed the rainforest back until it was only a lush green belt around the equator. Despite its apparent confusion, the rainforest is actually a highly organized environment where evolution provides every species with a niche, its own place where it eats, sleeps, and multiplies. In a process known as co-evolution, many species have evolved in tandem in order to better suit each other's needs, such as the sword-billed hummingbird and the datura flower. The bird's long beak has evolved to reach nectar hidden deep in the flower. The sickle-bill's beak has also evolved to match the shape of a flower, and the flower has evolved so only the sickle-bill can feed from it, increasing the odds that its pollen will be carried to a flower of the same species. But these are just two stories of co-evolution among millions. Small wonder that the rainforest is a virtual jungle of life. While there are 700 kinds of trees in all of the U.S. and Canada, there are 750 tree species in a mere 25 acres of Malaysian rainforest. Panama contains more bird species than all of North America. There are more fish species in the Amazon than the North Atlantic, and the entire number of ant species in the British Isles can be found in one Peruvian bush. So much animal life would not be possible without lots of food. The rainforest is a vast fruit bowl containing over 3,000 different types of fruit. Papaya and mangoes are among those that have found their way to Western tables. But the first rainforest fruit discovered by Westerners was the banana. Introduced to Europe in 1882, bananas were originally available by prescription only. Today, of course, they're an over-the-counter fruit. But Europeans were aware of the rainforest long before the 19th century. When Columbus landed in the Caribbean in 1492, he said that he had never beheld so fair a thing as the forest that cloaked the shores of the New World. Mountains are filled with trees of 1,000 kinds and tall, so that they seem to touch the sky. From the 15th to the 17th century, the lucrative spice trade lured European explorers to the islands off Southeast Asia. To this day, many of the world's spices are derived from rainforest plants: vanilla, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, tamarind, and pepper. During the 18th and 19th centuries, many scientists exchanged their lab coats for safari jackets and began exploring the rainforest. In 1770, an English chemist found that a marvelous new substance could rub out pencil marks.
That's an
Rubber
internal
got
error.
its name, and the eraser was born. Latex, the basis for natural rubber, is the milky white juice of the hevea tree, and acts as a defense mechanism that gives bark-eating animals a sticky case of lockjaw. But rubber has been bouncing around Central America for thousands of years. Mayans and Aztecs used a rubber ball in a game that's similar to modern-day basketball and soccer, but the similarities end there. In the original game, the loser was often sacrificed to the gods. By dipping their feet in latex and letting it dry, they also invented the first rubber shoe. Hip boots would be the footwear of choice in the floodplains of the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon and its tributaries contain 5,000 species of fish,
alerts
with an
are disabled for now.
2,000 more awaiting discovery.
Because, something.
If we were to journey up through the multi-layered habitats of the rainforest, we would begin in the flooded basement. Here in the South American rainforest, the berry-eating tambaqui fish can grow up to 6 feet long. It's an important seed disperser, cracking the hard outer shells of rubber seeds. The sloth, which occasionally descends from the trees for a swim, holds the record for being the slowest moving land animal, and possibly the slowest swimmer. Just as graceful, but far swifter, are river dolphins. They have little use for vision in the murky waters of the Amazon and are almost blind, relying on their superb sonar for navigation. Perhaps it's this ability to find their way in the dark which explains the belief of some Amazonian tribes. At night, dolphins can transform themselves into handsome men and seduce innocent women. Many an unexpected pregnancy has been blamed on a dolphin. The rainforest ground floor. Welcome to the twilight zone. The jungle's upper layers block out so much sunlight that only 1 to 2% reaches the ground floor, shaded and dim, but surprisingly open. The notion of the impenetrable jungle dates back to when the first English explorers traveled into the rainforest in boats. Along the riverbanks, they saw tangled walls of plants and vines that flourished wherever the sun pierces the canopy. Assuming that the entire rainforest looked the same, they named it after the Sanskrit word for thick vegetation, Jangala. Certainly when it comes to a plant's struggle for sunlight, it's a Jangala out there. Some plants steal their nutrients from others. The Rafflesia sinks its roots into climbing vines. With no need for leaves to capture light for energy, it produces the world's largest flower, 39 inches across. Smelling like rotting meat, it's commonly known as the stinking corpse plant. Most plants growing in the rainforest understory wage the war for sunlight with large leaves. The larger the leaf, the more surface area the plant has to capture the elusive spatters of sunlight filtering down from above. Because of their ability to survive in dim light, many of our most popular houseplants originally came from the rainforest understory. Vinca minor, or the common periwinkle, was once known as the flower of death because condemned prisoners were made to wear garlands of periwinkles on their way to execution. Also called the sorcerer's flower, it was used for its sedative effect and to exorcise evil spirits. And there may be a pollen grain of truth to that. An alkaloid from the rosy periwinkle is used in cancer therapy and has raised the survival rate of childhood leukemia from 20 to 80%. Over 2,000 jungle plants have been identified as having cancer-fighting properties. Even chimps of the African rainforest are aware of plants with curative value. When suffering from stomach trouble or worms, they search for an herb called aspelia. For ants, beetles, weevils, termites, millipedes, and worms, the rainforest is a giant chef's salad, providing an endless supply of plant matter. sweat bees quickly descend on a dead lizard. Just the advanced detail among legions of other species on rock patrol. Accelerated by constant heat and humidity, invisible fungi and bacteria are on round-the-clock decomposition duty, feeding on a steady rain of organic matter. These rainforest cleanup crews are so efficient, the forest floors stay surprisingly clean. Unlike human street sweepers, the rainforest sanitation crew is never overwhelmed by the endless rain of leafy confetti falling from the giant trees above.
I'm not sure where
surrender.
The network issue is happening on goldenvcr.com, but something is amiss.
For some rainforest animals, the ground is an alien place. This lemur from Madagascar, called a sifarka, has evolved such long limbs for life in the trees that walking is a real stretch. But the animals that should be skipping through the forest are the ones with the fewest predators, such as this tiger from India, the biggest jungle cat. One rainforest animal thought to be most frightening is the gorilla, the subject of such fictions as King Kong. In fact, it's quite shy and gentle. If the mountain gorilla has a mean streak at all, it's towards vegetation. Its diet includes 50 different kinds of plants. When bamboo shoots are in season, an adult female will eat 40 pounds a day. An adult male, twice her size, consumes about 75 pounds. Although squirrel monkeys will visit the ground, they spend most of their lives in the trees, living in groups ranging in size from a dozen to several hundred. The rainforest understory extends from ground level to about 30 feet up. Here, water can be found in bromeliads, special plants that hold pools of rain in their leaves. Some bromeliads can hold as much as 2 gallons. These microhabitats serve as watering holes and are home to tree frogs, salamanders, beetles, flatworms, flies, spiders, and even crabs. They also serve as nurseries for insect larvae and frogs' eggs. When a chimpanzee decides it's bedtime, it climbs into the understory and makes a fresh bed of leaves. This forest layer is occupied by various low-level climbers, such as tarsiers, aye-ayes, lorises, bush babies, and jaguars, the second largest jungle cat.
One of these is not like the other.
The jaguar was worshipped by the Indians of Central America. The Mayans made him their jaguar sun king. The highest order of Aztec warriors was the jaguar knights. The Aztecs believed the fruit of one understory tree, the cocoa tree, was the food of the gods, and they used it to create the first version of heavenly hot chocolate. Heaven for a species of moth is the fur of a sloth, a slow-motion carpet ride shared with fleas, ticks, beetles, and algae. When the sloth descends to the ground to defecate, the moth jumps off, lays her eggs in the dung, and catches her ride back up to the canopy. But the rainforest's most popular dance of interdependence is the endless parade of plants and their pollinators. The hermit hummingbird has licked the problem of getting at nectar by downsizing. Tinier than a butterfly, a hermit hummingbird weighs less than a wedding band. While there's a profusion of pollination going on in the jungle, there's also an abundance of seed dispersal. Since there's no wind under the rainforest canopy, Fruit trees rely on birds, bats, and other animals to spread their seeds. To attract seed dispersers, rainforest trees usually have brightly colored fruit. One of the most interesting dispersal stories is that of the fig and the fruit bat. Fig trees thrive here, and fruit bats do an excellent job of feeding on figs and then voiding the seeds over the forest. But a bat's digestive juice is an acid bath to a fig seed. So the fig has evolved a laxative in its fruit, ensuring speedy passage through the bat's digestive system. In Samoa, it's estimated that over 80% of the seeds deposited on the ground are dropped by fruit bats in what's called seed rain. Perhaps the most notorious fig is the strangler fig. It sends prop roots down a host tree, then overruns the entire tree, finally smothering its victim inside a living coffin. The rainforest middle story is really a travel zone, an airy highway consisting of tree trunks and vines, or lianas, leading to the canopy 75 feet above the ground. Lianas don't waste energy in growing thick trunks. They use trees to support them, climbing quickly from the ground into the canopy, where they grow leaves, flowers, and fruit of their own. The middle story's most famous traveler, Tarzan, actually swung from lianas that were no longer attached to the ground. In other words, dead lianas. The real experts are gibbons. With the longest arms of all primates, they swing through the trees with the greatest of ease. In contrast to the tailless gibbons, some animals have a prehensile tail, or fifth limb, like this woolly monkey. Hang gliding is another mode of transportation in the airy middle story. With web-like skin, some frogs and squirrels are excellent gliders. There's even a flying tree snake from Southeast Asia, which can flatten its body and glide over 50 yards.
Oh no. No thank you. What? They made that up.
If there's any place in the rainforest that can truly be called a jungle, it's the upper story, or canopy. It's a canopy that reveals the rainforest's greatest powers. A thick green shroud that catches 99% of the light, the canopy accounts for 90% of the rain.
So subdue it, put it down. What he was saying was, snake coming. Snake coming. Subdue it.
Photosynthesis. It's a great pumping station that returns huge quantities of water back into the sky.
That was a total
a gigantic air
total
filter
dud of
that
a tape.
inhales millions
We
of
only
tons
watched
of
like
carbon
5 minutes of
dioxide
it
a year,
before we hit the bricks,
recycles
but we
it,
got snake
and
coming out of
exhales
it.
oxygen, the breath of animal life. A sturdy shield, the
Thank you,
canopy
Jesse
protects the
Duplantis.
soil from the destructive power of the rains. It's a largely unexplored territory, home to thousands of plants and animals yet to be discovered. But how do so many species manage to live their entire lives without ever touching the ground? Food for canopy dwellers comes from the bounty of leaves, fruit, and prey. Soil supplied by the steady decay of plant matter accumulates on the canopy's branches, providing a firm footing and nutrients for an abundance of greenery. There are industrious plants like epiphytes, which grow on other plants without harming them. They're power plants, filtering water and capturing solar energy. There are sinister plants. For many insects, this yellow pitcher plant is a watering hole they'll never leave. An insect stopping in for a drink slides down the slippery walls and falls into a vat of digestive juice. Some pitcher plants are 12 inches deep and hold up to 2 quarts of liquid. Scorpions, lizards, and even rats have been found in their traps. 2/3 of the estimated 35,000 species of orchids are found in tropical rainforests.
Damn it.
The orchid mantis has adapted to go incognito. It's perfectly camouflaged as it waits for unsuspecting prey. And there are plenty of victims to choose from. It's estimated that the canopy layer alone is home to over 100,000 species of insects. Including one of the largest known insects, the atlas moth, with a 12-inch wingspan. When it comes to jungle calls, the switchboard is always crowded. Above the canopy is the emergent zone, the rainforest windswept penthouse. The crowns of the tallest trees tower 200 feet above the rainforest floor. The giant tualang trees of Malaysia reach 230 feet, the tallest on record rising to 285 feet. The emergent zone is often a dangerous place for a bird to fly. In Africa, they do so at great risk because of a formidable predator, the African crowned eagle. With its hunting skills and powerful talons, it can pluck a bird or even a monkey out of a tree. The Mayan belief in a world tree from which all things flowed is myth. The 20th century notion that the rainforest is an endless source of plenty, never to be depleted, is merely an illusion. Since the turn of the century, the rainforest has been diminished by half. At present rates of destruction, in 40 years, it will be gone. It was once written, "The forest is a peculiar organism of unlimited kindness and benevolence that makes no demands for its sustenance and extends generously the products of its life activity. It offers protection to all beings, offering shade even to the axeman who destroys it." The writer was Buddha, who received enlightenment under a fig tree.
Did we get... Oh, I missed Bill Butt? Sorry. I got to go back for that. I was trying to... Bill Butt. I was trying to diagnose these network issues that I think are an outage for DigitalOcean. Bill Butt! and the making of segment. Eyewitness Jungle.
The Eyewitness Museum, created by combining traditional filmmaking techniques with state-of-the-art graphics, stripping away the mysteries of nature and science to reveal the essence of each subject. Bringing the world into sharp focus. The making of Eyewitness. The distinct style of the Eyewitness books is the basis for each of the programs. Each half-hour episode is based on a book title. The Eyewitness book's visual style gives the program makers a starting point and a challenge. The challenge of transferring the clarity and super-realism into moving images and sound. Now let's take a look behind the scenes at the making of Jungle.
Big cat.
When we asked our art director to build us a rainforest inside the Eyewitness studio, he thought we were joking, but not for long. Once the daunting task had been costed and planned, the whole thing came together within 2 days. First of all, tree trunks, both real and manufactured, were put in position.
We went and cut down a swath of rainforest and shipped it to London.
Our plant experts had bushes, plants and flowers flown in from all over the world. Vines and creepers were attached to the trees. And a carpet of ground vegetation was laid out. In order to make the set secure for our squirrel monkeys, nets were then placed around the whole set.
This is a lot of work.
And the set dressing was made secure for the monkeys to clamber over.
One 30-minute videotape, man. Eyewitness was serious business.
The cameraman had to work fast to photograph the monkey traveling through the set. Except when it stopped for a drink. The monkeys were provided by a primate sanctuary in Sussex, England. Most of them had been hand-reared as pets and then cared for by Penny at the sanctuary when their owners found them too much to handle. They immediately felt at home in the rainforest set. Squirrel monkeys are very inquisitive. In order to stop them running riot all over the studio, each set had to be completely enclosed in close mesh netting. In the shots used for the film, the netting was removed electronically to give a clean white background. Some monkeys were shot against a blue background. In the edit suite, this could then be changed to a background of our choice. A contoured blue background was built which matched exactly the shape of a small Waka-chan model. By reducing the size of the monkey, we could show the impressive scale of the Inca Tree of Life.
Neat. Oh yeah, the making of credits always. You get horse. You get sharks erupting out of a volcano. Boy. Well, folks, we certainly have learned a lot. Cyclones, sowing, the Velveteen Rabbit, and the rainforest. This has been a very educational stream. I hope you've enjoyed it. Any last requests? If not, I will see you back here on Wednesday. Yes, you did miss the Velveteen Rabbit. I'm sorry. It was very heartwarming. Oh yeah, nothing bad will ever happen in New Orleans. It's safe for at least 10 years in 1995. Oof. Oof. All right, well, everybody have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.
Stand back.
The alt text of Peter Gabriel. Bye.